Hello, everybody. It's Saturday, so we're thinking about the epistle for Sunday, which is from Ephesians 3, verses 2 through 6. And so Paul's talking about a mystery and that he has a stewardship of that mystery. And so the first thing I want to talk about is what is a stewardship? And a stewardship is when somebody owns something that it doesn't belong to you, but has given you sort of a right to handle that and to protect it. And Jesus tells parables about stewards and things like that somebody has gone away and left other people in charge of their property not to dispose of it, but to manage that property, let's say. And so, the one is where you get 10 talents returned, 5 talents returned, and one guy who buried the talent that he was given and gave back what he'd been given. And so he was excoriated for being a very poor steward of it. And so when Paul talks about a stewardship, he's talking about the stewardship of the gospel, the stewardship of the truth. That's the important thing to know is that Paul saw all these things as true, and it was important to him to pass on the truth. And this is what he'll tell Timothy, is to guard the good deposit that was entrusted to him. And so the point in liturgical churches in general of talking about an issue called apostolic succession is twofold. And the main thing is that it's not preserving anything other than the truth. And the truth is passed down from one generation to the next. And so you need to be careful who you ordain, is the point behind all that. And it's frankly, it's the thing that people totally misunderstand about an issue in the Catholic Church called papal infallibility. And so there are very, very few things that a pope can speak on where it's considered to be infallible, and they're very, very careful about it. It's been over 100 years since anybody's spoken in such a way that it's considered to be infallible. And those had typically to do with doctrines concerning Mary, the last few times a pope has spoken infallibly. To change a doctrine of the church, which has been established before through that infallibility idea, is impossible. And it's a guard against heresy. That's the point of papal infallibility, is to say, no, you can't say that. If you say that, you're saying things that the church has determined long before you. And so you can't, it's a check against a pope going in a direction that takes the church along a path to heresy. And so that's actually the function of papal infallibility. It protects the tradition and the truths that were entrusted to the church in exactly the way Paul would want it done. And so that's the mechanism that the church developed to protect the integrity of its message. Popes just can't say whatever they want to and speak in that way. There are very few things that can be, and they're all the dogmas of the church, about 275 of them. And I'm probably going to do a podcast on these, and probably do it in reflecting with Suzanne. That's kind of my plan for starting sometime this year in 2026. But Paul is he understands the notion of stewardship. He understands that he is the protector and the guardian of this truth. And then he goes on to say, so you've heard about that stewardship of God's grace that was given to me for you, how the mystery was made known to me by revelation. And that revelation, what he's sort of alluding to there, is his Damascus Road experience. So the mystery was made known to him by revelation, as I've written briefly, and he's written about it several times by this point. So he said, then you can see that I have an insight into the mystery of Christ, which was not made to people in previous generations, as it's now been revealed to his apostles and prophets by the Holy Spirit. And then he goes on to tell us exactly what that mystery is. The mystery is that the Gentiles are fellow heirs, members of the same body. Now, in Isaiah's prophecy, for instance, and also in Simeon's reaction, the old man who's a priest who has been told that he would see the coming of the Messiah. And so he sees Jesus and he reacts and says, Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, for mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people, a light to lighten the Gentiles, the glory of thy people Israel. And I quote this frequently for a reason, and that's because I want you to understand that Jesus, as a baby, gave eternal hope to this priest who had been promised that he would see this thing. But notice that he includes the Gentiles in this. And so you could say, well, what's Paul talking about then when he's talking about a mystery? about the Gentiles, because in the Isaiah passage, we see that the nations will stream to the light and all that kind of stuff. So what does Paul mean? That this is a mystery? No, no, no. It was revealed through Isaiah. It was revealed through all the prophets who ultimately believed that the Gentiles would see the blessedness of God's people if God's people were willing to follow him, obey him, love him faithfully, which they were very rarely able to do for very long, that they would see that, and the Gentiles would go, those Israelites, they've got it right. Well, Paul says that's actually not what that means. That even the understanding of the prophecies were a mystery to even the prophets. That they didn't see this thing, that the Gentiles would be fellow heirs and members of the same body. In Judaism today, if you went to a rabbi today and you said, I'd like to convert to Judaism, the rabbi is actually obliged, according to tradition, to throw up some roadblocks to you making that idea, to making that a reality. I mean, and the first is that no, you'll be rejected by all your family. And then it's, you're going to have to abide by 613 commandments as opposed to just, the Noahide laws. And there's only 7 of those. So why would you want to take on responsibility for 613? And the final one is the whole world's going to hate you. Well, and the basis for them discouraging you is this. If you keep those Noahide laws, Noahide, so look those up if you want to. There's just 7 of them. If you keep those, you're going to have a place in the world to come. Well, they do see still a distinction between your place in the world to come and their place in the world to come. And so there's an elevation to keeping the 600 laws and all that kind of stuff. And so when Paul says that the Gentiles are fellow heirs, that's a very different idea. It's a very different idea from Judaism and converts and the way that Judaism looks at Gentiles in the life of the world to come. And so when Paul speaks of the mystery of the Gentiles, he's not talking about them being able to participate in the life of the world to come. It's that they're fellow heirs and members of the same body. There's an elevation of the Gentiles to the same level as the Jews. It's hard if you're Jewish then not to see that as a sort of not just an elevation of the Gentiles, but a diminution of your place. And so that we share fully in that is the mystery that Paul's talking about. Not that the Gentiles would share in the world to come, but that they would not just have a share, they would have the same share. And so that's the difference. And so and Jesus tells these wonderful parables about people who come at the last minute to work. There's the parable that Jesus uses of a man hiring people to work in the field, and some people come early in the day, some people come all through the day, and then some come at the last hour, and they receive the same payment for the services at the end. They receive, in other words, the same reward would be what Jesus is pointing to. And so that is the same kind of an issue. It's just that, yep, I've been following Jesus all my life. I've done all these things. And now this other person who comes in at the last minute gets the same reward. And the answer is yes, they do. They get the same reward ultimately. Yeah, you might have to go through a little bit to get there, according to Catholic theology, but you ultimately get the same reward. And so that plays itself out even in Christianity. And I know people who get right upset when other people come in at the last minute and receive the same reward. And so when Jesus tells that parable, he's not speaking against human nature. He speaks as somebody who actually really, really understands human nature. And so we should always celebrate. We should always want people to have the same reward we do. But there's a mechanism, and the truth is the mechanism by which you get there, is accepting the truth about Jesus and accepting the truth about, well, you, and then doing something about that and conforming your life then to the will of God. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.